part of this that recognize that us getting this right away for free, okay, in exchange for that we ought to come back that allows us some specificity about what our responsibilities will be for that road. Some specificity from staff. They see our pads as we laid them out. It's a great site plan for retail. You know, we got a potential hotel site there. We got some inline retail. We got some pads with I mean, that's all in place. But right now, just throwing numbers out in a staff report, I know I know some say it's your design criteria. I kind of question whether some of it is. I'd like to drill that down with Ryan and just come back and see if we can't. And I think maybe a little encouragement, quite honestly, from you guys could help. If it's not, and staff says no, that that's the best we're going to do, then we'll just ask for continuance. We'll come back and go the other route pursuant to the STIP.
Well, I appreciate your feedback on this. I'm a little bit of at a loss because I thought that we already did have a development agreement pursuant to the multifamily that the road issue would be part of that. Now, we did specify 2 years on that. Is that not correct?
There's an option, yes, under the stipulation. There's no development agreement, but there's an option in the stipulation to the zoning, which is approved.
Yes.
That says one of two things for them to be able to, in essence, pull a building permit.
Okay.
And that is, one, that they either cause to have the right-of-way dedicated today, which obviously we have to sign the plat, yep, for that to happen. Or two, we would do an agreement, we'd file as a matter of record, and we'd agree to dedicate it at some point in the future. And it's in accordance with a certain configuration, which is, quite honestly, a little bit different than the plat. So we got one of two ways. In essence, there's no development agreement because it doesn't dig into any details, but if we move forward, and I'm going to pick my words carefully here, we move forward maybe with the misunderstanding that as we allowed that stipulation to go forward, that we would have, because that was our understanding, we would have this dialogue and we would come to a development agreement that would, again, not let us do things that are unsafe, not let us get off the hook, but just sort of not end up paying for that entire road again ourselves. And I just have a little increased concern, Councilman, that if we do dedicate it, maybe a little more drill down, but this exactly, there's been a decision, there's actually going to be a road here. And what it's going to be, and maybe even what it's going to be called. I know that seems like a really small issue, but it kind of jumped out at me when I read the staff report tonight. That's an issue. I mean, it is. And I'd at least like to have a chance to dialogue with staff and see why the changing of the name makes any difference about how it impacts property to the south. With all due respect to those arguments, I don't really get that, to be honest with you.
Well, I'm rather incredulous that you hadn't been counseled on that in terms of the change of the name. But that's another discussion. I potentially would be in favor of a continuance if there is still room for discussion.
Just from our standpoint.
But you know, that's something the rest of the governing body would have to discuss as well.
Right. What's your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, we did have several discussions with Mr. Peterson and also his partner in the development, Chase Simmons. We talked about, you know, and did float a proposed term sheet as to how we could fund the different or the roadway out there. You know, ultimately, I could walk through each of these items and tell you about our discussions on all of them. You know, ultimately, what my impression, and if Mr. Peterson can correct me if this is a misperception, but I think I asked the question pretty directly. If no development happens on their site before the city decides to build this roadway, what would the developer be willing to contribute to this roadway in terms of monetary payment? And the answer we got back was nothing. And so from staff's perspective, you know, we had, and I think Mike talked to Cheryl about it as well, certainly the construction of this roadway through the middle of their parcel to us, and certainly the way that they've got the plat laid out, it would appear would provide a direct monetary benefit for them. And they were not willing to contribute at all, at least from the representations made to staff, monetarily to the construction of that roadway. They basically said, if development comes along and we develop a portion of our property, and we have to build in essence, a private roadway to access part of our development, that's what we're willing to build. We'll pay for that ourselves, and then we'll give it to the city when the city's ready to build the rest of it. But in the scenario where the development doesn't come first, where the city's prepared to build the road, it's the city, in essence, funding the entire cost of construction. And staff, I don't think, felt very comfortable moving forward with that concept, particularly in light of this governing body's position on the rezoning, that as a condition to the rezoning, the applicant would either dedicate the right-of-way, one, or two, enter into a development agreement wherein the right-of-way would be dedicated, I think it was within 12 months, is that right,
24,
Mike?
24 months.
24.
Years.
So within 2 years. So that's kind of where we ended up and locked horns. And Mr. Peterson, if I've misconstrued your position on that, go ahead.
Well,
and tell me.
may I, Mayor? First of all, I don't think it was ever, in all the, and wasn't on every call, right, as much as I like talking to you, Mike. I don't think it was ever as succinctly stated as that. We're not going to talk to you because you won't pay for this, any part of this new road. And you're right. If you would have said that, and we kept saying it, whether you asked it or not, no. And by the way, that's a totally inaccurate statement. Because if we sat there, if we dedicated the right-of-way, right, you would have a probably $1,350,000 road to build through that. You know what $350,000 represents? The right-of-way you'd have to condemn and pay for. Okay? Number one. So to say, again, we're not contributing to the road system. We contributed mightily to the first road system that everybody signed off on. We gave right-of-way, and we now will be the proud contributors of $1 million by the end of this year. We contributed, and we're going to be contributed again. The second point I will refute, no, it really doesn't bring us any great value. Because I can take, just as the plat sits today, and this would probably mean, and maybe it's what I'm now moving towards because I'm getting a little fired up here, but you know, we can let these guys go. We can let them go. We'll go back to our plat, our zoning that's in place. It's private drive served. It's C3 zoning. I can do everything I need to do and still honor the idea we'd like to have retail there, all by private drive. And my address, by the way, then, for the shopping center would be Gardner Road. And I'll live with Gardner Road, 188th and Gardner Road. I'll live with that. So you're not bringing me any great benefit by bringing me and then saying, oh, by the way, you get to pay again. Give us the right-of-way free and let us pay again for it. No. I'm sorry. If there's any tip of the scale, it's right there.
So that's what we ran up against. That's the position that we encountered. You know, we had the stipulation on the zoning that, you know, they had to dedicate the right of way, and basically they indicated that they were unwilling, I think, unwilling to do that. Because they didn't want to, they wanted to have a firm commitment from the city that they wouldn't be required to pay for any of that.
One more indulgence, and I promise I'll be quiet, because you don't need to hear two lawyers yin and yang at each other. The Royals are playing. We got to see how they're doing. But again, that overarching statement, we can't talk because you won't pay for any of it. One, I already talked about it, won't say it again, right away, and we said, if you guys are ready to build the public street system, we're not ready for development, I mean, why would we for part of that road? But two, if we're ahead of you and we need to get, let's call it 2 pads in from 188, what we said is, we'll build a part of the road to serve our traffic, right, which would be very easily, it's done all the time. If we've got what's the total width, Mike, 36 feet? If we